Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for today's webinar. Myself Kamlesh. I hope everyone is doing great. Well, I really value this opportunity to introduce our esteemed speaker, mentor for today's webinar, Mr. James Watson. So let's welcome James to our webinar. James carries an exceptional track record in sales with over 30 years of experience and has helped many startups so far and small business owners to grow their sales exponentially. He brings to the table great experience in strategic planning, sales management, customer relationship, and and he will enlighten us today with his journey. James is working with LTS as a mentor and has helped many startups to increase their sales revenue over the years and build sales channels for multiple clients of LTS accelerators. Let me give you a quick glimpse of the LTS accelerator program. So, what is LTS accelerator program? The LTS accelerator program is an efficient way for startup founders to get the capital funding, and mentorship they need to take their early stage company or a non-profit company to the next level. The LTS Accelerator program inspires and engage entrepreneurs from all industries, geographies. We are committed to nurturing and supporting promising startups. Our program, LTS Accelerator, offers a comprehensive range of resources, mentorship, techies, fundraising opportunities, and networking opportunities. And we also provide assistance to establish sales channel and many more. For more details, I will share the Accelerator program link in the text box. You can have a look on it by click on the link. Now, I request Mr. James to start with the presentation. So, Mr. James, now it's over to you.
Thank you, Kamish. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with LTS, which is a great accelerator program, and that really goes hand in hand with sales and setting up the sales infrastructure while you're trying to get funding, or if you have funding and you're trying to get to the next level. So, my passion is working with small to mid-sized businesses and with my over 30 years experience, I've worked with large corporations, I've worked with mid-sized companies, and then I've worked with smaller companies and startups to get to the next level. Um, the key is really to set up a sales infrastructure, have a sales playbook, and then have an onboarding process and have a sales plan. And even if a lot of startups that are early stage, they maybe have funding or they're seeking funding, it's a chicken and egg thing because they need to show the sales and the founder or co-founders need as a proof of concept to do a certain amount of deals. So it's important to start sales and marketing as early as possible. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And as far as about me, my company is Sales Catapult, which I started about 2.5 years ago, and I'm a fractional VP of sales that works with small to mid-sized businesses in you know, 1 to 50 million range, and then also in the early stage startups. I have special programs for that. I am part of the largest sales consulting organization in the world and have resources from over 10 years of experience with that organization that are very helpful with my processes along with my experience. Next slide, please. A lot of companies are not aware of how much money they're leaving on the table, and that can hold true when they're already established to some degree and even doing $1 million in revenue. They're still going at it alone, but they need to have the infrastructure. The same holds true for early stage companies, and the faster you get your product or service, which oftentimes is unique, possibly proprietary, speed to market is important, funding is important. And that's also where LTS can really help out in combination with the sales coaching. Next slide. Data from the small sales administration, uh, and you can take a look at that, but the numbers are kind of staggering. And so a lot of times, companies don't want to invest in the sales and DIY it early on, but very many companies fail, and it's not because they didn't have a great idea or a great product or a great service. It's because they didn't have the funding fast enough, or they didn't have sales infrastructure. Next slide, please. 76% of companies, and this is from the SBA, a large study that they did survey, report that their sales organizations are underperforming. These are just some statistics here from Daily Sales, which has viewership on LinkedIn of about 50,000. And what is one of the biggest challenges right now? It's the economy. A lot of times companies go on the cheap, or they pull back during that time, when in reality what I'm seeing is companies that are actually investing during that time, while others are sitting back during what is a tough economy right now. And so business development is very can be much tougher, and you have to work about twice as hard to get half the results. Next slide, please. Do you think your prospects like being cold called? No, the answer is no. And calling on the phone before you know someone and just dialing for dollars doesn't work anymore. It did in the past, but now there's a lot of social media channels, and the best one is LinkedIn and LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is part of LinkedIn. And I work very closely to help out with the social media side, building up one's profile on LinkedIn, why story, headline, and then getting what's called a high social selling index score, which LinkedIn tracks. Anything over 65 is good. I built mine up over time to 74. Most people are under 50. This is critical. Next slide, please. Is it harder to get results from cold calling? I think everyone knows the answer on that. It's it's very clear. Next slide. Do the reps want to work on a commission-only basis? Not good ones. And a lot of startups will, give equity, which if you look back at the stats on the failure rate of startups, that's a very risky proposition. Best reps and getting that first few business development rep is critical, because you need to have someone that possibly is from the industry, brings a Rolodex experience, has a track record of success. And we have an internal organization called Amplify that actually helps out with that process. And I've utilized that with startups to help them get to the next level. And then I onboard those individuals with the sales playbook that I've created. Next slide, please. Why are sales revenues not increasing as planned? Number 10 reason, there are no weekly sales meetings. Number 9, ineffective business development training. That ties back into having someone doing business development. Now, if you're in that early stage and you're seeking funding, then you're likely the venture capitalist or whoever's investing in you is going to want to have a proof of concept. They're going to want to see that the CEO or the founder, co-founders are able to bring in X amount of deals. If it's a enterprise type of a deal, longer cycle, they may want to see 10 deals. If it's a transactional type of business, they might want to see 50 or 100. And so then you don't bring in a business development rep right away. I would coach the people that are doing the sales, which are the founder or founders, and I do have a specific program for just that. Also, no annual and quarterly metrics reviews. You have to track your metrics, and a lot of people don't know how to do that. It's called building it backwards. It's looking at where you are now. It could be at 0. It could be at you might be doing 300,000 revenue. You might have 200,000 in funding. But if you don't know where you want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, and then working backwards, and then looking at how many calls does it take, or how many, I should say, interactions does it take on LinkedIn, with InMail, doing email campaigns, marketing, whatever it is, how many touches does it take or interactions for whoever is doing the sales to be able to get a meeting? How many meetings does it take to get a deal? How long is the sales cycle? And what is the average size of the deal? Once you know that, then you can structure a proper commission plan and a quota for whoever is going to end up doing the sales when you bring on that first junior business development rep. Next slide. Number 7, no customer relationship management system. A lot of folks out there try to use Salesforce. It's good for large companies, and it's a shiny object, but it's very expensive. I work for companies that have it, but they had a $200,000 a year Salesforce engineer helping to set everything up. So the CRMs that I recommend are HubSpot, ClaritySoft, and PipeDrive. Those are really, they're inexpensive, but they're very good for marketing, doing campaigns, tracking the information. They have everything you need at a reasonable cost. Next slide, please. No sales pipeline forecasting tool. You really, unless you're trying to do it with spreadsheets, and unless you know all those metrics that it takes through the sales cycle, you can't establish a pipeline and then put percentages to where the likely closes. Is it during the current month? Is it in 2 months? Is it in 3 months? Is it in a year? Nothing wrong if it's in a year, but establishing that up front and knowing that helps you to work on what you need to work on, and it helps out with forecasting, which is not only critical internally for companies, it's also critical if one has investors and a board, because they will, in their quarterly meetings, hold you accountable for that. Next slide. Improperly staffed sales team. That really goes back to what I was saying before. That could again be, depending on what stage you're in, that could be you, whoever's listening to this video right now. And that doesn't mean you're improperly staffed yourself, but it means you might need help. And then when you do make that first hire, or maybe you have someone internally that's doing the sales that either isn't qualified to do it, or they need to be trained on how to do it. They might have the will to do it, but then the other critical component is, do they have the skill, or can they be taught the skill? Next slide. Clearly defined sales metrics. We really already covered that, and it's critical to have a CRM to be able to track that, actively review it. And then you need to have about a 3-month trailing analysis of the sales metrics in order to determine what should be the comp and commission plan and how you can forecast. No defined sales process. It's important to initially do assessments of where you want to be, where are the gaps in your whole sales process, and then coming up with a plan and a sales playbook and an onboarding process once you get that first person in place. But this also ties in for founders and co-founders that are directly doing the sales when they need to at that stage. The comp plan doesn't incent the correct behavior. This flashes forward to when one has a business development rep in place. And the rule of thumb is to go 50% base salary and 50% variable. You have to know what the quota is. So if someone has a quota of $1 million, that typically is going to be 10 times what the comp should be on at target of quota. So if someone has a $1 million budget on a SaaS type company, then they should have a quota of 100,000, or sorry, a commission plan and a base salary plan of 50,000, and 50,000 variable if they hit their number, and then accelerators where they get paid more once they get to that 100,000. Number one reason is no shared sales and business plan. It's important, even if you're early stage and you just have founders and maybe a couple of people doing sales, you have someone doing marketing, someone doing social media. It's very important to share that, make sure everyone's on the same page, make sure there's a value proposition. And that's something that I work on as well, is establishing that value proposition, because that can be that everyone should be able to articulate it. Even if you have a an admin or someone that's in tech, when they're at a conference or when they are, in a social gathering, someone asks what they do, what the company does, they typically will talk about what they do on a technical side or what they do for the company, as opposed to being able to articulate, within 10 seconds for starters, what does LTS do? Then they can go into, if someone's interested, they can go into what they do. But it's really about having everyone on the same page, and this makes a big difference. And it helps to structure the pitches. It helps to structure how you're representing yourself on social media and with marketing and sales. Next slide, please. So here are some things to listen for that are issues that I have encountered, and that with over 10,000 consulting assignments that Sales Acceleration has done collectively over the last 10 years, are things that we have heard again and again. Too much of our annual revenue is coming from a couple of clients. It could be one client. This also becomes very critical over time, because when companies are getting valued, either to go public or for familial transition or to sell the company, anyone looking at that company is going to want to know that you don't have more than 10 or 20% of your revenue coming from one company, because that really is a red flag and can lower the value of the company and the probability of the company going public. That's something in the future for those that are listening to this presentation. But it's important to, again, build it backwards and look at even where do you want to be 10 years from now, where do you want to be 5 years from now, and then making sure that you are getting a diverse client base, and that no more than 10 or 20% is coming from one client. I'm uncomfortable with our company's lack of sales activity results. Well, that can be, if you're doing the sales yourself, that's because you don't have necessarily a value proposition. You know what your product or services is great, but you have to articulate what benefit you're bringing, to the potential clients out there. We can't hire the right sales rep. Well, that might be flashing forward for those that are listening here, but that's where it becomes important to actually spend the money to have assistance with a recruiter, and we help with that with our own internal recruiting division that is very reasonable, but that first hire is extremely critical. The sales, our sales could be better. That goes without saying. We're looking to scale our sales for EBITDA and for exit. That again is a flash forward, and I already talked about that. And the training that we've been through doesn't seem to help. Well, that could be because if you're just doing it yourself, you're just Googling things, trying to use AI, reading books. This doesn't work any better than me trying to come in and run your business after 10 minutes of learning about it. That's where you need to have help with someone that's going to help you set up the sales infrastructure and then scale your sales and profits. And lastly, most of our sales are coming from referrals. You may already have a few clients, and then you're relying on them to, give you that business. That's really, where it's important to take it to the market and to do so effectively. Next slide, please. Why do companies fail to maximize their upside revenue? Lack of structure and resources, lack of processes and collaboration, lack of accountability, and aligned priorities. Next slide, please. The solution is to assess your current sales personnel, which could be yourself, and then figuring out how can you better improve how you are presenting yourself. Assess your current sales process. That's what I come in and do actually have assessments. I'll have one flashed up here with a QR code that will allow you to take a sales assessment and figure out where your gaps are right now. Build and implement sales processes. This where it's important to do that assessment and then come up with a mutually agreed upon statement of engagement with a timeline which is typically going to be 3 to 4 months initially in what we call a phase 1 sales infrastructure plan, and then that can graduate on into what we call a phase 2, which is just more of my hours and then doing actual hands-on management. Setting up that sales infrastructure, coming up with the sales playbook early, and then knowing how to take it to market, and then getting the next person, getting someone on board when the time is right is critical. Next slide. So assess your current sales personnel. We've really already gone through that. That could be you, and so this is pretty self-explanatory here, but it's important to reflect on that and then do assessments, which again I'm going to provide at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. Assess and build sales processes. This goes back into setting up a timeline, and then what are the deliverables going to be? What are you going to be implementing with the sales playbook? Next slide, please. Then implementing those sales processes. Typically, you're going to start the sales cycle is, and the first part is very important, is doing research and having tools to do research on each prospect. If it's transactional, it's going to be minimal. Whereas if it's an enterprise type of a deal, you really want to get a profile. You may only get one shot at it initially, and if you don't do a good job, it might take you a while to get back in there, if at all, because you might only have one shot at that. Next slide, please. Hire right. We've really already covered that. When the time comes, it's critical to get that first business development rep, and a good one. Next slide, please. Define your value proposition and culture. There's actually, a process for going through and establishing that, and then when you come up with, a business, a description of who you're trying to hire, we help out with that, and also that goes into the culture of the company. Do they fit in? This is very important because you can have someone that has skill, will, experience, but if they don't fit in and align with how your company does things and don't really embrace it and understand it, there's a good chance that they won't succeed, or that they're just going to be journeymen and have mediocre success. Next slide, please. Putting that job description together and then actually incorporating it into the interview process. And then I've got a lot of training and doing interviews, and then I even help out with that process when when sales, when Amplify gets down to a few candidates, then I'm involved in that interview process. But then I also share the interview questions, and it's very important to drill down and ask second and third level questions, as opposed to just listening to someone tell you about how great they are. You really want to validate that and find out about specifically how they succeeded. Next slide, please. Onboarding and certification. This is something that once you hire someone, you actually have an onboarding process that you go through, and then I get involved, or if someone just uses me initially and then they do it on their own, I provide resources for doing a final certification before someone goes out and represents your company. Next slide, please. Building a sales playbook, we really already covered that, but that is critical, and it starts with doing the research. Then once you have someone that's interested and engaged, doing qualifying, which I help to build qualifying forms. And the goal there is to flush out a lot of information, and then at the end come up with 3 value propositions, not yours. You need to have that on your own, but then 3 value propositions for the company, so that you can build your presentation around that. Then when you do your presentation, you need to have an agenda. You need to know how much time you have. You need to focus on what your service or product does to actually provide a solution to those value propositions. And then creating that sales playbook and modules. We've been talking about that the whole time. After you do the presentation, or during the presentation, at the end, you want to go through what you went through. I have a Q&A, find out if there are any additional issues and that you've met their needs. And then very importantly, find out what are the next steps. That will help you also to know, are they, ready to do something now? Will they do it in a month? Will they do it in 2 months? So finding out what that next step is very critical. And then once one has closed the deal, then there's an onboarding process that needs to be followed, and I structure that to make for the first 3 months, which is very active engagement with the new client, and then doing quarterly meetings and making sure that the sales rep, or if you have a client relationship rep that's servicing the account, that they're calling on that account on a quarterly basis, making sure they're renewing or still using the products if it's not a SaaS type product, and that they are happy, and they will really appreciate that. And then also, then you can earn the right to get referrals and recommendations on LinkedIn, which is very important. That's what people look first when they evaluate you and your company. Next slide, please. Um, we can go ahead and everyone can just read through that really quickly. But long story short, I worked with a company that was looking to get its second round of funding, and they weren't hitting the numbers they wanted to hit. They were doing pretty well already, but they even had a VP of sales there. But they brought me in along with an outside consultant before I became a consultant, and then we hired 9 people, and we went into new markets. That company went from 60 million in funding up to 300 million in funding, and from 12 million in sales to over 30 million in sales. Next slide, please. Okay, what's next? We have a sales agility assessment. You can just use your camera to go onto that QR code, and it'll give you a 10-point multiple choice questionnaire that's based on the 10 most critical sales metrics for any company. And it only takes less than 2 minutes to complete this. And when you do, you get immediate feedback on where are your gaps. It'll tell you, are you doing well? It'll give you a score out of 100. Most people score between 30 and 50. It'll realize what all those gaps are, and then it'll tell you what you're doing well, and then add something to it. It'll say you're doing this okay, but you should add these things. If you're not doing this at all, it's critical that you do it. And so I use that agility assessment because I get a copy of it for an initial conversation, which is complimentary, 15 to 30 minutes, and then you'll get something out of it, whether you decide to use me or not, or you use me down the line, or maybe you're just at a stage where you need to work with LTS Accelerator, or in combination with me. Any of those are possibilities, but the bottom line is it's important to really get help when you need it, and that's early on. Thank you very much for joining today, and I wish everyone good luck.
Wow, James, you just shared a very excited sales insights today. Thank you once again for your time. Well, thank you so much to all the attendees as well for joining us today. It's been an incredible journey, and we are grateful for your presence here. Before we say goodbye, I believe today we all have learned something new and exciting about the sales strategies and growth framework for startups and small business. I hope you have found these insights valuable and that they will make a positive impact on your sales process, frameworks, and strategies. Please find the details about the LTS Accelerator program into the text box. Moving forward, I want to express a sincere appreciation to our amazing guest speaker today, Mr. James Watson. Well,
Thank you, Kamlesh.
thank you. The conversation doesn't have to end here. We are committed to provide ongoing support and resources to help you on your sales journey, fundraising, and networking opportunities with our IELTS Accelerator program. So, thank you once again to all of you for taking the time for this webinar and to make it successful. Until we meet again, stay curious, stay inspired, and remember that learning is a lifelong journey. So, goodbye for now and take care.